Hey guys, Gongrongzong here. So with Father's Day around the corner, I thought it'd be nice to make a little compilation of the best dads in WoW. Best is of course subjective, but I'm defining it loosely as the father having a great love for his children, and or sets an amazing example for them to follow. I'll definitely not be able to cover all the great dads in WoW in this one video. So definitely let me know by leaving a comment below who you think is the best. Number 1. Varrock Saurfang. Saurfang, the character that's getting much more of a spotlight in Battle for Azeroth. Saurfang has had many colourful titles in his life. He has been the Supreme Commander of the Might of Kalimdor, in which he led both the Horde and Alliance forces against the Silithid. He had been second in command of the Warsong Offensive and a chief advisor to Garrosh when he was War Chief, and he was also second in command to Doomhammer in the Old Horde. Titles alone do not make a great father though, but it's how he carries himself with his position that makes him a great father. Saurfang has always stuck to a strict code of honor, even at times against his own fellow Orc brethren. These traits of honor have been carried down to his son, Dranosh Saurfang. Even when Dranosh was just a mere infant, Saurfang refused to bring him through the dark portal to Azeroth. I made a promise to his mother before she died, that I would cross the dark portal alone. Whether I lived or died, my son would be safe, untainted. Saurfang knew that he could never let Dranosh be exposed to the Fel, fearing that it would corrupt his character. I would not let the warlocks take him. My boy would be safe, hidden away by the elders of Garadar. His number one concern and priority was to his son, not to his clan or to his war chief, a characteristic that I dare say is uncommon and even harder to uphold within the culture of the Old Horde. When Dranosh journeys to Azeroth and reunites with his father, they take part in several skirmishes together in the Warsong Offensive. Dranosh would take on the aspects of honor that his father held so dear, forming an amicable relationship with Bolvar Fordring, and keeping peace with the Alliance bases at the base of the Wrathgate. Dranosh would unfortunately be slain and resurrected by the Lich King, but at the end of the day, it is his father who stands by his son's body, opposing any that would stand in between him and Dranosh. Behind you lies the body of my only son. Nothing will keep me from him. It is Varian who eventually lets the grieving father pass, and he promises to bury him with the respect that he deserves. You will have a proper ceremony in Nagran next to the priors of your mother and ancestors. Honor, young heroes, no matter how dire the battle, never forsake it. From the very beginning of his son's entry to this world till his very end at the hands of the Lich King, Varrock Saurfang thought only of his son's safety, his upbringing and his legacy. He truly deserves a distinguished spot in the list of the best dads in WoW. Number 2. Tyrion Fordring, a man that needs no introduction. High Lord of the Silver Hand, Supreme Commander of the Ardent Crusade, legendary wielder of the Ashbringer, and the one to finally shatter the Runeblade Frostmourne itself. In the same vein as Varrock Saurfang, Tyrion was a man of great honor, holding on to his values even at the expense of his status and reputation. Above all of this, however, was his undying commitment to his son, Talon Fordring, in which we've seen him to never abandon, no matter how far away he might have been or how lost the cause may have seemed. When he was a younger man and the governor of Hearthglen, Tyrion would encounter an old orc hermit who would later turn out to be none other than Eitrigg. An unwitting battle would ensue, but in a surprising turn of events, would conclude with Eitrigg saving the Paladin's life. Tyrion would later defend Eitrigg in combat against his very own human brethren, causing him to be brought to trial for treason. Tyrion, however, would refuse to repent on his actions, claiming them to be honorable. I will remain committed to the Alliance until my dying day. Of that, have no doubt. But I cannot disavow the oath I took. To do so would be to betray everything I am and everything we, as honorable men, hold dear. In doing so, he hoped to be an example to his son, in how we should not blindly harbour hatred towards others, and that everyone deserved a second chance. Unfortunately, his actions would result in his exile, and to spare his son the pain, his wife would lie to his son that his father had passed away. However, Tyrion would secretly return to Lordaeron just to witness his son's ceremony in which he became a Paladin. He would also be present when Talon is inducted into the Silver Hand, and also later when he becomes the Lord of Mardenhold. The dangers of returning to the very city that exiled him as a criminal and traitor would mean nothing compared to the love he held for his son. My son, Talon, was only a child when I was found guilty of treason and banished by the Alliance to live a life in exile. I chose to remain here so that I could watch over him, to somehow ensure that he would grow up an honorable man. Years later, Tyrion would be devastated to learn that his son had joined up ranks with the fanatical Scarlet Crusade, and had even become the High Lord of the Order. In a lengthy but very memorable vanilla quest chain, Tyrion accepts help from both members of the Horde and Alliance, collecting mementos and symbols of his son's past in an effort to convince his son to leave the Scarlet Crusade. You must believe me, Talon is a good man. He needs to remember what it is to be noble and honorable. I know that in his heart, he knows what he does is wrong. Will you help him? Will you help him remember? Tyrion would eventually manage to convince Talon to leave the Scarlet Crusade and return to his noble roots. But in a tragic and heart-wrenching event, the father-son reunion would be cut short, with Talon being slain by a high-ranking member of the Crusade right before his father's eyes at Hearthglen. Tyrion would greatly mourn the death of his son. Spurred by his son's death, Tyrion would return to active duty and become one of the greatest forces for good that Azeroth has ever seen, reforming the Silver Hand and later the Argent Crusade. The site where Talon was slain would later be named after him in his memory, Talon's Tower. Players are also sent on quests to retrieve a painting of Talon and his family from Stratholme, undoubtedly at the behest of Tyrion himself. Despite the consequences, Tyrion always placed his son first, tried to save him when he joined the wrong side, and then became his inspiration all the way to the peaks of Icecrown. Without a doubt, Tyrion is an example of an exemplary father who defied all the odds. Number 3. Kain Bloodhoof, legendary leader of the Bloodhoof Tauren, was a father that loved his son very much, accompanying him with his wisdom even after his death. We are first introduced to Bane in Warcraft 3. Following the establishment of Orgrimmar, Kain and his people return to the plains of Mulgore to settle in their new home. However, shortly after, Bane is captured by the Centaur, and Kain falls into a deep depression upon receiving the news. As the days pass, the reality that Bane was already dead dawned upon him, and he soon lost the will to continue leading his people. Thankfully though, Rexxar and Rohan would come to his aid, and together they eventually managed to find his son and free him from the Centaur's clutches. With his hope renewed, he again pledges the forces of the Bloodhoof Tauren to Thrall. At the end of the day, he was a father that cared for his son first above all else. Following his tragic death in the Mak'gora against Garrosh, Kain would continue to make appearances, both directly and indirectly, to Bane and the various denizens of Azeroth. In the aftermath of Garrosh's defeat at the Siege of Orgrimmar, Bane would be chosen by the other Horde leaders to act as Garrosh's defendant at his trial. This was absolute insanity to Bane, to defend the very man that had killed his own father, and he struggled heavily with the burden. However, in an emotional encounter, Bane was able to consult with the spirit of his father, and was eventually convinced to perform the task to the best of his ability. Bane would also describe his father to Anduin, who seemed genuinely intrigued by the wise old elder. My father once said, "Destruction is easy, but creating something that lasts, that, my father said, was a challenge." What else did your father say? Kain, as described by his son, seemed so very wise to Anduin, and he hungered for more. Bane snorted slightly in laughter that was warm and genuine, and yet laced with the pain of remembering too early for nostalgia. There was something about eating all your vegetables. This was a touching reference to when Kain was alive in WoW, and would give advice to the young orphans during Children's Week. A young orphan approaches him for his hoofprint, sort of like his autograph. What advice should I give to him? Listen to the spirits, yes. Maybe something about eating all his vegetables too. Finally, in an alternate timeline, Bane murders Garrosh following the Mak'gora and becomes the war chief of the Horde. Bane had to battle against this alternate version, but was unable to defeat him. Bane realizes that he cannot defeat himself, and the only way to win was to accept him. He reminds the alternate version about the wisdom of their father, and after remembering so, they make peace with one another and return to their own realities. Throughout his life, Bane constantly reflects back to his father's example for guidance on how to continue leading his people, a clear testament to how well Kain has brought up his son. Father, you were a man who led wisely, who battled skillfully, and who always sought the best for your people. May your spirit continue to guide us, Father, as you did in life. Number 4. Varian. Saving the best for last, we have none other than Logosh, former High King of the Alliance and the King of Stormwind. There's no way we can go through a Best Dad contest without the inclusion of Varian himself. Varian has always been a good man at heart despite the tragedies that he's had to endure. He has always believed in truth and justice, and like the other fathers on this list, honor above all else. But what makes Varian unique from all the others is that he openly admits to learning much from his son, perhaps even more than he has tried to teach him. The strength of their relationship was what gave him hope for a brighter future, and that there were alternatives to the bloodshed and war that had governed his early life. My son, a terrible darkness has returned to our world. As before, it seeks to annihilate everything that we hold dear. I go to face it, knowing I may not return. All my life I have lived by the sword. I've seen kingdoms burn and watched brave heroes die in vain. It's been difficult for me to trust after losing so much, but from you I have learned patience, tolerance, and faith. Anduin, now I believe as you do, that peace is the noblest aspiration, but to preserve it, you must be willing to fight. Make no mistake though, in the early days of their relationship, when Anduin was a mere boy and teenager, Varian was initially disappointed in him, in that he wasn't turning out to be a hardened warrior just like himself. This would strain their relationship, but would gradually transform Varian into becoming a more understanding and benevolent leader. Others would see it as a softening of his character, and that he was becoming weak. But if anything, their relationship was only making each of them stronger. Anduin had changed his father, and his father had also changed him, both for the better. No longer would his father only think that might makes right, and no longer would Anduin meekly back down from a challenge. Each had transformed the other into a better ruler, in their own unique way. If we are to ever restore this world, then there must come a time when the leaders of Azeroth are no longer the warriors, but instead the healers, those who mend instead of those who break. Only then can we truly cure our deep ills and achieve lasting peace. Multiple cinematics shown in-game have shown us that Anduin took the death of his father very heavily. He seemed lost without him, the burden of kingship too great to bear. My people like me, respect me, but they don't believe in me. Not like they believed in him. I've heard the voice of the people, but how do my father's advisors feel? I fear they do not trust me as they did my father. Nevertheless, slowly but surely, Anduin would reflect back on his father, and by his example, learn how to lead his people with a firm and steady but generous hand. Father, you never surrendered, even here at the very end. I cannot do this, Father. I can't be the hero you were. I can't be the king you were. What am I supposed to do now? What a king must do. We cannot blame Anduin for having doubts. He is very young, and by all accounts it is difficult to fit his personality into the position he is expected to fill. Nevertheless, it is clear that his faith and conviction are drawn from the memory of Varian, perhaps dare I say, even more so than the light. Almost every one of his actions as the now King of Stormwind and leader of the Alliance are contemplated with his father in mind. He has been nothing but an inspiration for his son, a firm guiding hand when he was alive, and an ever-accompanying comfort after he has passed. When we win and the Lich King has been defeated, then let us hope your time, a time of peace and healing, will begin. When that day comes, you will be greater than I. And that's a wrap. My own list of 4 of the best dads in WoW. This is of course just my opinion, so definitely feel free to let me know in the comments who else you think is worth mentioning. Now at this point, I usually thank my patrons, but I think they'll let me off just for this one. Of all the people in the world, I'd like to thank my own pa for always being there for me no matter what, and for loving me regardless of who I choose to be. He's not going to see this, but I just can't make a Father's Day video without acknowledging him. Happy Father's Day! And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Azeroth.